Hello everyone and welcome to another video on Python programming. In this video we will be doing a small exercise on if statements. Now in the previous video you might have already seen some of the basic concepts surrounding if statements. However, in this video, just to drive home the point or the purpose of an if statement, we will be doing a small exercise. So let's first revise some of the concepts of an if statement. So a basic if statement can be something like this. We have a small condition where we're checking if a variable x is greater than 5 or not. And if it is greater than x, we print a statement over here. So if this condition is met, we print this statement. Else, we move to this statement block. Now our variable x has the value 5. Now since x is not greater than 5, what this will do is, it will check this statement, and since this will be false, we skip this statement block and move on to this statement. So as you can see here. Similarly, we can do something where we are checking multiple statements. We use the elif statement in such a case. So now in this block we are checking in one of the conditions we're checking is if x is equal to 5 or if x is greater than 5. And then finally, if both of these conditions are not met, we say else and we print whatever, or we do whatever is in this particular statement block, which is a simple print statement. So as you can see, x is indeed equal to 5. So this is the block that will get executed, as you can see here. Now another example are nested if statements. So nested if else statements are if else statements within if else statements. So let's look at an example. As you can see here, we have a string stored in a variable called orange quality, and the string is fresh. Now we have an integer, or a float in this case, 4.0 stored in orange price. Now our first statement is checking whether orange quality, the variable orange quality, is it equal to the string fresh. Now within that, if this statement or if this condition is met, we do another check where we're checking what is the price. Is it lesser than 5? If it is, we do this block. Else, we execute this block. Finally, if our initial statement or initial condition is not met, we move on to this else block. Now when I execute this, what should happen is I will enter this block because this is true, and finally I will enter this block because this condition is also true. So I should have this printed. I will buy 5 dozens, as you can see here. Now let's move on to our main exercise for this video. So this was all just a revision. Now we're going to use some or all of these concepts in a sample project or a sample exercise for your further practice. So in this exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to request the user to enter a number between 1 and 20. And our code is going to check whether this number entered is an even number or an odd number. So as you can see, there are two sets of checks that we're going to do in this code. The first check is going to be whether the number that is entered is between 1 and 20 or not. And if it is not, we have to say it's an invalid number. But if it is entered between 1 and 20, we have to move on to the further checks, which is whether it is an even or an odd number. So let's see how we do that. So in this piece of code, what we start with is a print statement saying please enter a number between 1 and 20, and then we add an input command. This input command will open a box where we can enter whatever number that we want to enter. Now we use this int keyword to make sure that whatever we have entered into the input box is stored as a int data type in the enter num variable. Once we do that, our first if statement is going to check whether the entered number is greater than or equal to 1 or lesser than equal to 20. And lesser than equal to 20. So both of these conditions have to be met. If this condition is true, then we have a valid input and this statement is printed that we have entered a valid number. And then we move on to the rest of the statement block within this if statement, which is another set of if and else if statements. If our number is not between 1 and 20, we move to this block, and this block prints that we have entered an invalid number. Now, once we have, say, entered a valid number, we move on to this block, this if elif statement block. Now what this block is checking is whether the entered number is an even number or not. Now as we know, an even number is divisible by 2 and leaves the remainder 0 when divided by 2. So this is what this check is doing. If this check is true, that means our number is even and we get printed that our number is even. The other check or the other if statement is checking whether it's an odd number, and that means when we divide by 2, we should get the remainder 1, as you can see here. and we get printed your number is odd. So let's execute this and see what happens when we enter a number. Now it's asking me to enter a number. Let's say I enter 17. Now that I have entered 17, as you can see, it's a valid number that I have entered, and the code is telling me that my number is indeed odd. Let's look at some other. What if I entered something else here? Let's say if I enter 16 now, since it's an even number. As you can see, 16 is also a valid number as it's between 1 and 20, and my number is even, and the code checks for that. Let's see what happens when I enter an invalid number. Let's say 25. Now when I enter 25, as you can see, it says I have entered an invalid number, and in this case what has happened is this condition itself is not met, and I have moved on to this statement block. So to give you a breakdown as to how our code has executed this, let me show you an example for the number, say 9. When I enter 9, the first check that happens, of course, is this check, whether it's a valid number or not. And since it is between 1 and 20, we move on to this block. And in this block is checking whether our number is divisible by 2 or not. And since it is not, it will leave a remainder 1, and we execute this block, which says our number is odd, as you can see here. So this was a brief recap into the if statement and if-else statements, nested if-else statements. We also saw an exercise where we used nested if-else statements. If you found this content useful to you, then please do like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video.